A 20-year-old girl, after the death of her husband, was forced to marry her 55-year-old brother-in-law. But on the very first night, her brother-in-law screamed in horror because something unimaginable happened that night. You will be shocked to know what happened. Before we proceed with the video, let me remind you to subscribe to the channel if you haven't already. If you liked our previous video, please type yes in the comments below. My 30-year-old brother passed away so suddenly that it left me in shock. I was at work when I received a call from my sister-in-law who said, "Arshad Bhai, please come quickly. Something's wrong with Faizan." I replied, "Don't worry, I'm coming. If his health is worsening, please call an ambulance." My office was quite far from home, but she said, "He is unconscious, maybe fainted. I am waiting for you, just hurry up." I quickly ended the call and drove towards my younger brother's house. My initial thought was to call the ambulance, but then I wasn't sure if my sister-in-law could handle the situation. She was a simple girl, always humble and quiet, never speaking loudly or giving direct answers. Her simplicity was admired by everyone around her, making her a person one could easily trust and rely on. I thought it wouldn't be something serious, as I had spoken to Faizan just last night, and he was perfectly fine. There was no sign of any health issues, and the sudden call caught me off guard. And lost in these thoughts, I rushed towards my brother's house. Upon arrival, I was greeted by an eerie silence. There was no movement, no sign of life in the house, only the steady ticking of the old clock on the wall. My heart began to race. As I walked into the room, I saw my brother lying motionless on the bed. I screamed in shock because his breath had stopped. A feeling of dread filled the room, and I felt a knot in my stomach. I asked my sister-in-law, Asma, "Did you call the ambulance?" She shook her head in denial. Without wasting any time, I immediately dialed the emergency number, asking for an ambulance to be sent immediately. I started trying to revive my brother, performing CPR with all my might, but I knew deep down that if I had known how serious the situation was, I would have called the ambulance much earlier. The minutes felt like hours as I desperately tried to bring him back to life. After what seemed like an eternity, the sound of the ambulance siren filled the air, and its workers rushed into the house. One of them, who seemed like a doctor, checked my brother's pulse and neck. He shook his head negatively and looked at the other workers. His face revealed nothing but solemnity, and I knew at that moment that there was no hope left. My brother was laid on a stretcher and transferred into the ambulance. The ambulance doors slammed shut with a finality that made my chest tighten. Within moments, the siren echoed in the air again, and my heart sank further. I was sitting in the ambulance with my sister-in-law, feeling numb as the flashing lights outside blurred my vision. We arrived at a large hospital where the emergency doctor immediately checked my brother. After a thorough examination, the news the doctor gave me left me stunned. My sister-in-law collapsed on the floor and fainted. The doctor informed us that my brother had passed away before we could even bring him to the hospital. His death was attributed to a heart attack. I felt as though the ground had disappeared beneath me. The life I had known was shattered, and I could hardly accept the words that had just been spoken. We had to return home with his body in the ambulance, and I couldn't help but wonder how everything had changed so suddenly. I called my wife to inform her, but even she couldn't believe it. My sister-in-law was sobbing uncontrollably. I tried my best to comfort her, but it was difficult. Words felt meaningless in that moment, as no amount of consolation could heal the raw grief we were both feeling. Soon after, my wife arrived at Faizan's house, but her presence didn't ease the pain. It felt as though we were in a dream, unable to wake up. Gradually, everyone in the neighborhood learned of the tragic news. People gathered in shock, unable to believe that a 30-year-old had passed away in his sleep. Some were in disbelief, while others were desperately searching for answers, asking why such a young life had been taken so suddenly. But no one had any answers. Meanwhile, I was not only dealing with the grief of losing my brother, but also deeply concerned for my young 20-year-old sister-in-law. She had suffered such injustice. She had become a widow in her prime, her life now forever altered. In her sorrow, she not only broke her bangles, but also hurt herself, unknowingly adding to her own suffering. My wife, Shayla, was trying to console her, but she was failing. Asma was inconsolable, and there was nothing we could do to ease her pain. Shortly after, Asma's relatives arrived, and everyone started offering their condolences. But her grief was too overwhelming for her to bear. The pain of losing her husband, the suddenness of it all, had completely consumed her. The very next morning, my brother's funeral was held, and his face was lost to us forever, never to be seen again. The memories of him were all we had left. I still couldn't believe it. My brother had left this world so quietly. Just the night before, when I spoke with him, he said, "I need to talk to you about something very important. I will come to your house in the evening, and we will sit down and talk." Little did I know whatever he wanted to tell me would remain a secret, locked inside him forever as he passed away. After my parents, the only real connection I had in this world was my brother. Now he too was gone, leaving me alone with only the memories of our conversations and the things we had yet to discuss. But in the midst of this sorrow, I also knew that life had to go on. My sister-in-law, Asma, was left alone with no one to turn to. The thought of her being forced into a marriage with her older brother-in-law, a man she barely knew, was a source of deep concern for me. The injustice she had suffered was unimaginable, and I couldn't help but worry about the future she was now facing. The events that unfolded on that first night were just the beginning of a much darker story. I sat by his grave for hours, tears flowing freely, mourning the loss of the person who had been my closest companion. The wind seemed to carry my sorrow away, but no matter how hard I tried, I couldn't shake the feeling of emptiness that had taken hold of me. After what felt like an eternity, I finally returned home, trying to pull myself together. My wife, Shayla, greeted me with a look of concern. "Asma is in a terrible state," she said gently. "Her family wants to take her with them, but she refuses to go. She wants to stay in her in-laws' house." I was shocked when I heard this. "But who's left in her in-laws' house except for me and you?" I replied. "We live in a separate house. This house was Faizan's, but if she wants to stay here, we have no objection. But how will she live here, alone in her mourning? How difficult it will be for her to stay in this house after the loss of her husband." Shayla responded softly, "She's in shock right now. We shouldn't force her. If she wants to stay here with the memories of Faizan, we shouldn't send her away." I agreed with Shayla, understanding that in such a delicate situation, we needed to be supportive. We explained this to her family, and they reluctantly understood and left quietly. Asma's parents were old, and she had 3 married sisters, but no brothers. In a way, she had already lost a significant part of her support system, and I didn't want to add to her grief. Shayla then said, "I will stay here with Asma for a few days, and you go back home." So Shayla and the children stayed at Asma's house, and Shayla took on the responsibility of taking care of Asma. She enrolled Asma's children in school and started teaching them as well. In addition, she kept Asma's spirits up by talking to her, comforting her, and being there when she needed someone to listen. Shayla's calm presence was like a balm for Asma's raw grief. But no matter how much Shayla tried, Asma's sorrow was overwhelming. She would often burst into tears, sitting quietly, unable to contain her pain. It was heartbreaking to watch someone so young go through such unimaginable loss. While Asma maintained a formal distance from me, Shayla often updated me on Asma's condition. I could tell that Asma was struggling with the weight of her new reality. She didn't know how to navigate the world without Faizan by her side. She was only 20, and yet she had been thrust into a widow's mourning with no time to prepare. The pain was palpable, and I couldn't help but feel responsible for her well-being. As the days passed, Asma's condition slowly began to improve. The deep sadness was still there, but it wasn't as all-consuming as it had been in the beginning. The more Shayla spent time with Asma, the more she began to open up. One evening, I went to meet Shayla. It had been over a month since I had been living apart from my wife, and I could no longer resist the feelings building inside me. The loneliness had crept in, and I missed the intimacy we once shared. The moment I entered the kitchen, I pulled Shayla close, holding her in my arms and expressing my love for her. She smiled and teasingly said, "It seems you've been missing me a lot these days." Without any hesitation, I kissed her neck, feeling the warmth of her skin against my lips. Just as I was about to let my emotions get the better of me, Asma suddenly appeared in the room. She didn't seem to notice us at first, but as soon as she saw us, she quickly covered her face with her dupatta and excused herself, walking away without a word. The embarrassment and guilt I felt in that moment were overwhelming. I had not meant to make her feel uncomfortable, but I knew that what had just happened might have added to her grief. Shayla, sensing my discomfort, said, "I think it's time for me to return home. How long will I stay here with Asma? Her waiting period is almost over, and I also want to go back. Living without my wife has become difficult for me, and I can't stay here much longer." I understood what she meant, and I agreed that it was time for her to come back home. The separation had been hard on both of us, and I missed her terribly. So I decided to call Shayla and the children back to our home. I reassured Asma that whenever she needed anything, I would be there for her. She was very important to me because she was my younger brother's wife, and I had a deep connection with her. She had lost her husband so young, and I couldn't imagine how difficult it was for her to navigate this new chapter of her life. Asma needed my support, and I provided her with everything she needed. I made sure to take care of her during her mourning period, respecting all the customs and meeting her needs. Every time I brought something for her, I did so discreetly, leaving it at the door, always mindful of the boundaries that had to be respected. I made sure to respect her space, but at the same time, I was always available whenever she needed something. Despite everything, the connection I had with her remained deeply personal. She was a part of my brother's life, and I felt responsible for ensuring she was taken care of. Before I knew it, her waiting period was over. Time had passed so quickly, and I didn't even realize it. After that, Shayla and I went to Asma's house and gently told her, "How long are you going to stay here alone? Either bring your parents here to stay with you, or you should go and live with them. You can rent this house, and whatever money you get from it can help you get by." Upon hearing my words, Asma began crying and said, "I don't want to go anywhere. This house is where my husband's memories are. Faizan was everything to me. As for my parents, they will never leave their home to come here. I want to live here alone for the rest of my life." Her words broke my heart. She was so determined to hold on to the past, to keep the memory of her husband alive in the place where they had shared their life together. I knew I couldn't force her to leave, but I also knew that she needed to find a way to move forward, to heal, and to make peace with her new reality. The house, now filled with echoes of the past, would be her prison if she didn't allow herself to start rebuilding her life. But as she had made clear, it would be her decision. I could only offer my support and hope that, in time, she would find the strength to move on. Asma's words struck me deeply, and my grief resurfaced. The shock of what she had said echoed in my mind, as if it was too much to process. Shayla had advised me to leave Asma to deal with her grief in her own way for the time being, and that it was best not to pressure her. However, I never stopped visiting Asma's house. Whenever she needed anything, I rushed to her side. I had promised myself that I would never let my widowed sister-in-law feel lonely. I would always help her with anything she needed during her difficult times. My intentions were always to support her, to ensure that she didn't feel the weight of her loss alone. She was family, and I couldn't bear the thought of her suffering without help. I also made a plan to talk to her after some time about remarrying, knowing that one day she would need to move on. After a few months, one day I went to deliver groceries to Asma. I thought it would be a simple visit, a way to provide for her needs, but it turned out to be more complicated than I had imagined. As I handed her the vegetables, I carefully said, "Asma, I think you should consider remarriage. It's been almost 6 months since Faizan passed away. You're still young and you're beautiful. There's no shortage of suitors. If you'd like, I can help you find a good match." I had chosen my words carefully, trying to show concern without making her feel pressured. It was a delicate subject, but one that had to be brought up eventually. She looked up at me and said, "If I marry again, I'll marry you." Her words hit me like a thunderclap. I stood frozen, looking at this innocent girl who had never looked me in the eye before, suddenly making such a bold statement. My heart raced, and for a moment, I didn't know how to react. I was speechless, shocked and confused. I couldn't believe it. I thought that her mental state might not be right, that perhaps she wasn't fully processing the situation. I quickly responded, trying to keep my composure. "Asma, what are you saying? You know that I am married. I have a happy life with Shayla, and we have 3 children. I will find you a good match. You will have a happy life, and you will forget the sorrow of losing Faizan." Asma shook her head, her eyes filled with a mix of sadness and determination. She said, "My sorrow can only be healed if you marry me. When I look at your face, I see Faizan's shadow. I want to move forward with my life with you. When you are near me, it feels like Faizan is still with me. I can smell Faizan's presence in you. If you want, we can secretly get married. Don't tell Shella about this. After all, you take care of all my expenses, so wouldn't it be better for you to marry me?" Asma's words were filled with a strange sense of helplessness, and it was clear that she was still deeply affected by her loss. She was seeking comfort in the only way she knew how, trying to fill the void left by her late husband. I couldn't look at her anymore, and I silently got up and walked out of the house. My mind was spinning, trying to process what I had just heard. I had gone to convince Asma to consider remarriage, to help her move forward, but instead she had proposed marriage to me. The situation was far beyond what I had expected. My mind was racing. I couldn't make sense of her words, and I struggled to understand the depth of her emotions. I thought she couldn't be in her right mind, that perhaps her grief was clouding her judgment. I knew I had to give her more time to process, but I also realized that someone had to be there for her. She couldn't be left to navigate this alone. If I could somehow support her, perhaps through marriage, her life could become stable again. But it was all too much, too soon. But I couldn't make any decisions without consulting Shayla. I didn't want to do anything behind her back, especially something as serious as this. Shayla was my wife, and our family's integrity meant everything to me. I needed to talk to her about this, and I decided to seek her opinion. But by the time I returned home, Shayla and the children weren't there. My heart sank as I searched the house, and then I called Shayla, hoping to speak to her. She picked up the phone, her voice strained. "I'm at my parents' house," she said. "My mother's health is very bad, and I'll stay here for a few days." She sounded distressed, and I could tell something was wrong. "What happened? Is everything all right?" I asked, trying to hide the worry in my voice. Shayla explained, "I didn't get a chance to tell you, Arshad. Actually, my mother called, and her condition is very critical. That's why I had to come here with the children." I was shocked, as Shayla had never left without informing me beforehand. Her parents' house was at the far end of the city, about a 2-hour journey away. Shayla added, "I took a taxi to get here. Don't worry, as soon as my mother's condition stabilizes, I'll return. The children also have their 2-month vacation, so I'm not worried about their education." I felt helpless. I wanted to be there for her, to support her. But I understood the urgency of the situation. "All right, if you need anything, just let me know. I'll transfer money into your account," I said, trying to be as supportive as I could. Shayla's mother lived alone and her father was no longer alive. Shayla had 2 brothers, both of whom lived abroad. They had settled in the United States with their families. This meant that Shayla was often the one to take care of her mother during times of crisis, which she always did with unwavering dedication. But this time she had left without waiting for me, and I was left to handle things here. In that moment, I felt a deep sense of isolation, the weight of everything I was dealing with. Asma's proposal, Shayla's absence, and the uncertainty of what to do next was beginning to take its toll. How would I handle everything? How could I keep my family together while also being there for Asma, who was going through so much pain? I didn't know the answers, but I knew that somehow I would have to figure it out. I checked the fridge, and food was left there. I heated it and ate, trying to fill the emptiness that lingered inside me. Afterward, I lay down on the bed, trying to relax, hoping that a bit of rest would help clear my mind. Just as I was closing my eyes, my phone rang, and the caller ID flashed Asma's name. I immediately sat up, sensing something wasn't right. "Arshad Bhai, I'm feeling very unwell. Can you come over?" she said, her voice shaking. Panic gripped me as I asked, "What happened?" She replied, "I'm having trouble breathing." Without a moment's hesitation, I reassured her, "Don't worry, I'll come right now," and quickly drove to her house. My heart raced as I thought of Asma alone in her house, in pain and distress. I couldn't allow her to suffer, not when I had the means to help. When I arrived, Asma was struggling to breathe, her chest heaving as she gasped for air. She seemed to be in a very bad condition, and her eyes were filled with fear. As soon as she saw me, she began to cry, and my heart broke for her. I rushed to her side, holding her close, my arms wrapped around her. She rested her head on my shoulder, clutching me tightly as she wept. I could feel her heart pounding against mine, and I wanted to pull back, to give her space, but her touch sent an unexpected surge of emotions through me. I struggled to maintain control, trying to stay focused on helping her. But at that moment, everything else faded away, and all I could feel was the weight of the situation. She softly whispered, "I can smell Faizan's presence in you. It feels like I am close to him again." Her words were like a knife to my heart. The perfume scent drifting from her was enough to tempt me, and I struggled to resist the overwhelming pull. I gently stepped back, trying to regain my composure. "Okay," I said, my voice tight with emotion. "I'll marry you, but you must promise me that Shella won't find out. If she does, it will ruin my marriage." Asma smiled softly, the corners of her lips curling as if she had been waiting for this moment. "I won't object. We can do this secretly, and I'll never tell Shayla. You already take care of all my expenses, so what's the harm in marrying me?" Her tone was filled with a sense of helplessness that made me feel trapped. I stood there staring at this innocent girl, struggling to comprehend what was happening. I had come to offer her support, to encourage her to find a way to move on with her life. But now she was offering me a solution I wasn't ready for. I didn't know what to say, so I remained silent, unsure of how to proceed. Without another word, I quietly left the room, my mind in turmoil. I had gone there to convince Asma to consider remarriage, to help her find peace, but instead, she had proposed marriage to me. My thoughts were racing. I thought she wasn't mentally stable and needed more time to process her grief, but I also knew that someone needed to support her. She couldn't go on living like this, isolated in her mourning. If I could marry her, maybe I could provide the stability she needed. But this was far beyond anything I had ever imagined. I didn't want to do anything behind Sheila's back, so I planned to talk to her about it. But when I reached home, Sheila and the children weren't there. I tried calling Sheila, and she picked up, her voice sounding distressed. "I'm at my parents' house," she said. "My mother is very sick, and I'll be here for a few days." I hesitated for a moment, unsure of what to say. "What happened? Is everything all right?" I asked, concern lacing my voice. Sheila explained, "I didn't get a chance to tell you, Arshad. Actually, my mother called, and her condition is very critical. That's why I had to come here with the children." I was shocked. Sheila had never left without informing me beforehand. Her parents' house was at the far end of the city, about a 2-hour journey away. "I took a taxi to get here. Don't worry," she reassured me. "As soon as my mother's condition stabilizes, I'll return. The children also have their 2-month vacation, so I'm not worried about their education." I tried to stay calm, but I couldn't ignore the unease settling in my chest. "All right, if you need anything, just let me know." "I'll transfer money into your account," I said, trying to offer my support from afar. Sheila's mother lived alone, and her father had passed away. Sheila had 2 brothers, both of whom lived abroad. They had settled in the United States with their families, which meant that Sheila was often the one to take care of her mother during times of crisis. But this time she had left without waiting for me, and I was left to deal with everything on my own. I was suddenly faced with a whirlwind of emotions, and I didn't know how to handle it all. Just as I hung up the phone, I found myself sitting on the bed, lost in thought. The weight of everything I had just experienced with Asma, combined with Sheila's absence, left me feeling overwhelmed. I didn't know what the right decision was anymore. My responsibilities to both women had become tangled, and I wasn't sure how to untangle them. Asma's confession had shaken me to my core, and now Sheila's absence made everything feel even more complicated. How could I continue to support Asma while remaining faithful to my wife? I knew that something had to change, but I wasn't sure what that change would be or how I could live with the consequences. For now, I could only wait for Sheila to return and try to find clarity in the chaos. But deep down, I feared that no matter what happened, I would never be able to truly move forward. The past and present were too entangled, and I wasn't sure how to escape the emotional maze I had found myself in. She said, "I told him I will leave you no matter what," and that's when things started to get worse. He became agitated, and I could see his blood pressure rising. I knew it would be dangerous for him, so I deliberately gave him a medication that would increase his blood pressure. That's when he had a heart attack. I knew he was gone because I didn't take him to the hospital in time. But I didn't tell you immediately. I waited until morning to call you. She made it seem like my brother had passed away peacefully in his sleep, though in reality, he had died right in front of me. I wanted to have you, and today, I've succeeded in my goal. I've already sent a message to Shela Bobby, telling her that you married me. She'll be here in a little while because I've also sent her a picture of the marriage certificate. Now that I'm married to you, why would I live the rest of my life pretending to be a widow? I will live my life with you just as Shela Bobby did. Looking at me with her big eyes, she seemed like a woman full of deceit. It was as if I had fallen into her trap. A few moments later, Shela entered the room, staring at me in shock. I tried to explain everything to her, but she didn't believe a word I said. She left, the same way she had entered, without saying a single word. I rushed after her, but by the time I reached outside, she had already left in a taxi. I went back inside and stood there, feeling trapped. In that moment, I realized I couldn't continue living with this woman. I divorced her immediately. I couldn't spend a single moment with her after the manipulation and deceit I had just witnessed. In front of her, I tore up the marriage certificate and walked out. My connection with Asma was shattered. I finally reached Shela and told her everything, but she was furious that I had even married Asma in the first place. Despite her anger, she forgave me because of our children. I felt a sense of relief wash over me, knowing that I still had a chance to rebuild what I had almost destroyed. Today, Shela and I are back together, but there are still times when I think about Asma and a chill runs down my spine. She was a psychological case, and it was because of her that my brother left this world. Her manipulation nearly tore my family apart, but in a way, her actions had revealed her true nature at the right time, making my life easier in the long run. Women like Asma neither build their own homes nor allow others to do so. That's why one must be cautious around such women. Now, Asma lives alone in that house, and I can't help but feel that it is her punishment to remain lonely for the rest of her life. It's what she deserves after everything she caused. Because of her, my beloved brother, the one whom I cherished more than my own life, is no longer with us. He was the brother I used to visit regularly, and I never knew that a woman like Asma was his wife. If I had known, I would have never stepped foot in her door or crossed her threshold. This is why Islam has commanded us to observe modesty. Many relationships, including the one between a brother-in-law and a sister-in-law, are considered to be sources of temptation and fitna. These relationships must be approached with caution and respect, as they can easily lead to misunderstandings and severe consequences. It's a reminder that certain boundaries must be maintained in order to protect one's family, reputation, and peace of mind.